doing, doing alternative clothing supply models. So there's a huge variety of different things here. And also, when I buy clothing, I can choose to buy from, Gap, a big international brand, or I can choose to buy from someone locally who's made it, in their sewing machine in the back room. So there's a very huge difference between lots of the choices that are available. And where there's lots of choice in markets, that's where consumers acting in this way can have a big impact. So the first thing, companies are key pressure points. In competitive markets, whether there's a difference, there's lots of evidence that change is being driven very effectively using these approaches. The second one is there are lots of different ways of classifying these types of behaviour. Academics have done it, and we have, I put in this list here that we as sociologists, we can look around the world and go, look at all the different types of campaigns around that are trying to achieve social justice aims, and we have, some of them we call human rights campaigns, and they're focused on rights. Other ones are labour rights campaigns, looking at trying to look at people who are in work and, do they have freedom of association, do they have living wage, and there are lots of campaigns. There's a big network in Europe called Clean Clothes Campaign that collaborates internationally on driving change in the clothing sector. Health rights is another one that we put here. There are lots of campaigns around particularly junk food, tobacco, this kind of stuff that NGOs do, sometimes taking the campaigns to the market, very famously with people like McDonald's. So there's lots of different categorisations, subcategorisations. We haven't really got time to go into that here. One key point to make is that what I've put here is multi-stakeholder initiatives are becoming the preferred format for progress. And a good example of a multi-stakeholder initiative is FSC, Forest Stewardship Council. And what it is, it involves forest companies, it involves campaigners, it involves human rights NGOs, it involves workers, it involves governments, a whole range of people sit round the table. They go, what is a sustainable and fair standard for producing forest timber products? We're now going to create a label that we stick on what we think are fairly produced or sustainable products, the FSC label in this case, and we're going to have a monitoring and verification system of auditors who actually go out to forests and either pass or fail the supply chains. And certainly FSC is a fantastic example. It's quite successful. There's general agreement around it. I think when I last looked, which was a couple of years ago, around 40% of timber in the UK was FSC certified. The logs each have an individual stamp on them that you can track with your phones and all this kind of, you scan it with the codes, and you can work out exactly which bit of forest it comes from. So the chain of custody, fantastic. Good auditing systems. I mean, there are problems. They find evidence of corruption and they fail and all that. But by and large, it's a hugely successful model. Called a multi-stakeholder initiative. There are lots of other ones. I put another example in there. Round Table on Sustainable Palm Oil is another one, RSPO. Much less successful, riven with conflict. Lots of NGOs have left it because they're not speaking to them anymore, and they think that it's certifying, armed gangs stealing land in Indonesia and all this kind of stuff. So, but there are lots and lots of multi-stakeholder initiatives. It's where lots of politics is going on now, and it's quite if you're stuck in the policy world, you can almost fail to notice all this stuff. There's masses and masses of political argument, debate, detailed work going on about how you actually get this verified product there, make it true and make it correct, and of course also the demands of trying to get market share for them. Okay, so how 5 minutes?
No, well, 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay, we have policy implications. Although I say it exists in a sort of parallel universe and policy people don't need to worry about it, and somehow often it's a response to policy failure and this kind of stuff. However, there's a kind of, it is possible for policy makers to identify these sort of civil society behaviours and go, actually, we think they're quite good. We think they're quite useful as a way of regulating externalities, doing all sorts of complex things around product supply chains that are causing damage. And there are 5 areas that we have identified where policymakers can intervene around these kind of behaviours. And very briefly, the first one is government purchasing. We know that some of the FSC timber sales in the UK are because now the government's own bodies are mandated to only buy FSC timber. So that we know that government procurement can do this. We know that government procurement can also do stuff around employment. It can do pretty much, there's lots of power in procurement. Rather than mandating change through regulation, you can use procurement as a fantastic tool. Also, the research that you do for procurement supply chains, you publish, you put in the public domain, and then consumers and civil society groups can also use that. Second one is information. You can force companies to disclose the nature of the manufacture of their products, where their supply chains are, how they're, who they use, what the ingredients are, all these kind of things. And some of that, it happens around the food industry a little bit. We'd like to see it across pretty much the entire product range so that civil society can engage in actually critically evaluating this stuff and making sure that what we're buying going forward is positive, has a positive impact. Tax, pretty obvious. You can have fiscal incentives for not-for-profit companies or fair trade companies, blindingly obvious. Regulation is another one. You can actually, interestingly around timber, not only do we have FSC, but we also in Europe, we've just had a ban on illegally logged timber. Strange that you'd need a ban on illegally logged timber. Anyway, there's now a ban on import of illegally logged timber in Europe as from last year. So often this stuff works in parallel with regulation. Finally, controlling corporate power. There are big issues around that. We've talked a little bit about that, and there are lots of ideas about how you can, amend company law to take to take the interests of other stakeholders into effect and all that kind of stuff. So, I'll finish off just by saying that to try and link it with some of the things that you were talking about, which is what we have here is an innovative economy, if you like, of citizen groups, human rights organisations innovating away, and every day there are new campaigns popping up. Just as I left to come here, we were contacted by an NGO working with fishermen in strangely enough, Honduras, and they discovered that a big company that had been forcing people off their land to put prawn farms around the edge of mangroves had been exporting these prawns to a high-profile British supermarket, and they contacted us and asked if they wanted, us to become, whether we could help them around this campaign. And just as I left, we were beginning to talk to the supermarket about it, and it's because we can phone up the CSR guys, and it's very possible that by the time I get back, we'll have had a conversation with the supermarket. They'll have withdrawn this supply chain because they don't want to go into the area of all this boycott and this stuff. So a lot of this citizen activity you never actually see, because you can have a discourse with the companies and they don't want these battles in the public domain. They don't want their supply chains to be shown to be hugely problematic. So I'm kind of hoping that we go back and we realise and find that the Honduran prawn stuff will be resolved. May not be, of course, and there may be a big campaign next year on Honduran prawns. But that's just like one example, if you like, of how this can that kind of innovation and that change can happen all the time. I'm just wondering if I've got time to finish on this little picture, whether it's going to go to the right place for me. Oh no, hang on. Oh, I remember where it is. Just in relation to the banks. Here we go. We were talking about a banking campaign. And I know we've been talking about indexes and all this kind of stuff, and I thought it would amuse you. One of the things that we do is we do indexes of corporate ethical behaviour, and this is a score out of 20 that we give companies for their ethical behaviour. And I'd just sort of like to show you that we have kind of Barclays down at the bottom, Citibank score 2 out of 20. You know, ING, famous Dutch bank there, is not doing very well on 5.5. We go all the way up to Charity Bank. And one of the things that we're involved in is a Move Your Money campaign, which is addressing the very issues that you suggested. We don't like the too big to fail model. We want consumers to move their money out of too big to fail banks or banks with problematic behaviour issues, and into some of the ones at the top, which you know, Ecology Building Society, Charity Bank, Triodos, a completely a kind of parallel economy of well-behaved banking institutions exist up there. And just to finish on, I'm just going to kind of show you the level of detail. I think is this going to work if I click on ING? Is that loading? I don't know. Yeah, it is. It's if I maybe busk for a minute or take some questions while it loads.
Just thinking, you said that ING was a bad example from the Netherlands. Triodos is a Netherlands bank.
It is, and it's a fantastic example. And so what we've, I can take some questions while we just show some of the. If we've got any questions.